look at me. Yes, you, look at me. So, you want to do more damage? You want to bring home a DPS report card that your mom would hang on the refrigerator. But do you have what it takes? Yes. Yes, I can see it in your eyes. You're going to do just fine. Well, you've come to the right place. First, yes, I'm still stuck here on this island, and it's been days or weeks, I'm honestly not sure anymore. On the bright side, it's left me with the time I need to come up with a list of the most important things you can do to increase your damage. Also, thank you for watching, and please consider subbing. You have no idea how lonely it is out here without you. I'm going to give you tips and tricks that will definitely increase your damage, both while parsing and while out fighting enemies in the field. So let's begin. First, assess the situation. Recognize what type of damage you want to do. What I mean by this is, the most important factor in your rotation is probably how many enemies you are approaching. If you're approaching more than a couple of enemies, you're generally going to want to lead with your AoE abilities and use an AoE spammable if one is available, such as Brawler or Whirling Blades or even Unstable Wall of Elements. It's better to do 4,000 damage to 6 enemies than to do 9,000 damage to 1. Conversely, if you're walking up to a boss with no adds or you're parsing, you're going to want to use a single target spammable because 4,000 damage to one target is obviously going to be worse than 9,000 damage to that same target. So the mistake you see a lot of new players make is they use the same rotation, whether walking up to a bunch of trash mobs or walking up to a parse dummy, when in reality you will end up getting comfortable with an AoE rotation and a single target rotation, and they'll be different. Next, light attacking between every ability will do huge things for your damage. If you've watched my videos before, I always talk about light attack weaving, and that's because of how absurdly important it is to do in Elder Scrolls Online. It's going to generate ult charge, and if you're not consistently light attacking, your ultimate is going to take a very long time to become available again. Light attacking will also proc your enchants on your weapons. There's a long list of enchants that you can take advantage of that have a chance of activating every time you light attack. Not only that, but there are a lot of sets in this game, such as Relican and Sororia, and even some monster sets that benefit from light attacking in between every ability. If you're wearing one of these sets and you're not light attacking, you are completely wasting the bonus that those sets are providing, and you might as well be wearing only 4 out of the 5 pieces of that set. Next, let's talk about your ultimate. As long as you're light attacking in between your abilities, your ultimate will be coming up every 1 or 2 minutes. In other words, it's going to be available very often, and so you should use it very often. A lot of new players will make the mistake of holding it just for the right moment, when in reality, it'll be back in a minute anyway. So go ahead and use it often. As you're navigating dungeons and getting more experience with them, you'll know when you should hold on to it for that next big trash pull or for the next tough boss fight. In the meantime, use it as often as you can. Another topic you'll hear me talk about in every build video is potions. Potions are incredibly important in Elder Scrolls Online. They're going to give your character significant buffs, not minor buffs, very significant buffs. They're going to increase your weapon or spell damage by 20%. That's massive. They're also going to do things like increase your critical rating and increase your sustain so that you don't run out of resources. When you get serious about doing damage or any time that you're parsing, you should be using potions, good potions, and you should be using them every time they come off of cooldown. It can be a little expensive when you're a new player, but down the road, it's absolutely worth it. And anytime you're pulling up to a parse dummy to test your damage, you should always use potions. If you're not using potions when you parse, you have no idea what you're actually capable of. And I'm not talking about trash potions. I'm talking about good potions, essence of weapon power, essence of spell power, and so on. Similar to potions in Elder Scrolls Online, food is incredibly important. Every 1,000 of a resource that you get adds about 100 of that type of damage. So 1,000 stamina is about 100 weapon damage, and 1,000 magicka is about 100 spell damage. The size of your resource pool is directly related to how much damage your character is going to do. It's a part of the formula that determines how much that next attack is going to do. So if you're eating a food that adds 5,000 magicka, that food is also adding 500 spell damage. That is a lot of spell damage. For this reason, and for your sustain, food is incredibly important in Elder Scrolls Online. You should never parse without food, and you should never go into a dungeon, an arena, or a trial without food equipped. It makes your character significantly stronger, and it's going to make it so you don't run out of resources. If you're running out of resources, it's likely because you're not using potions or food, or both. Don't be the guy that says food is expensive. It's not. It lasts 2 hours. Selling a few trash items to a vendor pays for your food for the next couple hours. Next, let's talk about gear. There are over 7,000 pieces of gear in Elder Scrolls Online that combine to form hundreds of sets. Not all of these sets are created equal. Not all of these sets are good. Not all of these sets are even a little bit good. Some of them are downright bad. Some of them are amazing, and some are just okay. If you're wearing one of the sets that is just okay, your damage is just going to be okay. And if you're wearing one of the sets that is bad, your damage is going to be bad. It's important to consider the gear that you're wearing and what it's good for. Some sets are better for AoE damage. Some sets are better for single target damage, and they're horrible at AoE damage. Some sets are just bad at everything. Or some sets are really good in PvE, and generally that means they're going to be very bad in PvP. And some sets are very good in PvP, but generally that means they're going to be really bad in PvE. Make sure that the sets you're wearing are good at what you want to do. And if you want to do a lot of damage, make sure you're wearing a set that is going to allow you to do that. The easiest way to achieve this is to follow guides that have a proven record of taking down content that requires high levels of damage, like veteran arenas or veteran dungeons or veteran trials. If you just want to quest and do delves, then it really doesn't matter what you wear. That type of content doesn't require a high level of DPS. But if you're watching this video, you probably have higher aspirations. Maybe you want to do dungeons. Maybe you want to do veteran dungeons and veteran trials. So just make sure that the build you're following is using sets that are going to be good for putting out large amounts of damage. So if you want to parse, then make sure you're wearing parse gear. And if you want to do AoE damage, make sure you're wearing AoE gear. Don't try to do AoE damage in a parse setup, and don't try to parse in an AoE setup. All right, next up, let's talk about your dots and your buffs. Dots and buffs are the hardest part for new players to master. These are going to be the single largest DPS loss in your build until you master recasting these abilities as soon as they fall off. It's easy to cast them the first time. What's difficult is casting them again the second that they fall off. So if you use Arrow Barrage, you're going to want to let it tick all the way down, and then as soon as it's done and hits 0, you're going to want to recast it again. Not before it hits 0, because if you reapply your AoE abilities too soon, that's how you run out of resources. If you reapply them too late, that's how you lose damage. So the sweet spot is to reapply them the second that they fall off. Same with your buffs, like Barb Trap and its Minor Force. It's going to start ticking down from 18 seconds as soon as it activates. That's going to give us 10% increased critical damage the entire time that that's ticking down. It's also put a nice dot on the enemy, so we're getting a dot and a buff simultaneously from this ability, which means the second that it comes up, we're going to want to recast it again, starting that timer over. When you're using all of your abilities, you're going to be managing a lot of them at the same time. This is where it gets complicated, and you're going to want to make sure that as soon as any of them fall off, you are there to reapply them with as little downtime as possible. Once you've gotten in the habit of light attack weaving, which is just light attacking in between your abilities, the biggest thing you can do to increase your damage is master the upkeep of your dots and your buffs. It's what all the new players struggle with. It's what everybody struggles with when they start playing Elder Scrolls Online. But once you get in the habit of reapplying them, your damage is going to go through the roof. But also remember what I mentioned on the first topic, which was your rotation is going to be dependent on what you're fighting. If you're going to be running up and fighting a large pack of enemies, you don't want to start spamming a single target dot or a single target spammable. You're going to want to be laying down your AoE dots, right? And your AoE abilities to make sure that you're hitting all of those enemies at once, because hitting one at a time when there's 10 enemies in front of you is a huge DPS loss. So if you're fighting a lot of enemies, focus on your large AoE abilities, focus on your large AoE spammable. And when you're fighting a single boss, go into your single target rotation, which will likely include a combination of AoE dots, single target dots, self buffs, and a single target spammable. Next, let's talk about your gear. Don't underestimate the importance of having the correct enchants and traits on your gear. The enchants are often going to do things like add maximum stamina. The traits will be something like Divines, which increases our Mundus Stone effect by 9%. On jewelry, these are just as important. Weapon damage enchantment and bloodthirsty. Both of these traits and enchants are going to add a massive amount of damage to our character. Once you have all of your gear properly traded and enchanted, it's going to have a very significant impact on the amount of damage you're able to do. Next, let's talk about the quality of your gear. It's important to gold out your gear once you're ready to start trying to go for those big parses to put out the high DPS numbers. but not every piece is equally as important to gold out. Some pieces are significantly more impactful when they're golded as opposed to others. First of all, what you're going to want to do is gold out your weapons first. These are going to have the single largest impact on your overall damage output. So start with your weapons, gold those out first. Then after that, move on to your monster sets, gold these out, and then your body gear, and then lastly, your jewelry. We're going to do jewelry last because it is so incredibly expensive to gold your jewelry that oftentimes you may not even get around to it. When the gear meta changes as fast as it does, it's not uncommon to leave your jewelry purple and save yourself the many hundreds of thousands of gold it would have taken to gold these out. You might lose a couple % of damage, but nothing too significant. However, when you do start trying to go for a 90 or 100k PARSE, golding out the jewelry does help. And in case you were wondering what happens when only part of a set is gold and the other part of the set is purple, what's going to happen is it's going to take an appropriate average of what the set would be if it was all gold and what the set would be if it was all purple. And it's going to find the appropriate average of the two depending on how many pieces of gold and how many pieces of purple you're wearing. So don't worry, if you only have 1 or 2 pieces golded, you are still receiving the benefit of having those pieces golded. The game does not require you to have all 5 pieces of a set golded out before you start receiving the benefits of having the set golded out. So to recap, you're going to do your weapons first, then you're going to do your monster set, then your body gear, and then last but not least, your jewelry, because it's the most expensive. All right, the next tip to increase your damage in Elder Scrolls Online is simply this: practice. Nobody gets big damage without ever touching a parse dummy. So at some point, you're going to have to come up to this big fellow right here and parse, which just means you're going to practice your rotation. And the main thing that you're practicing when you parse is keeping up those dots, keeping up the buffs, and using the spammable anytime that all of them are ticking. Not only that, but you're practicing light attack weaving, using those light attacks in between every ability, and using your ultimate as soon as it comes up, and using your potions anytime they're off cooldown. These are the things that you're practicing every time you step up to this dummy and parse. And at first, you're going to feel like you're all thumbs. That's completely normal, but you will be amazed at how fast it starts to become second nature to switch bars, to use the dot that fell off. It's all going to become very natural to you. I still remember the first time I stepped up to a dummy to parse. I was CP 160, I was wearing Hundings and Night Mothers, and I came up to the dummy to do a parse, and I hit like 12k DPS, and the person that was teaching me was doing almost 100k DPS, and I was just like, wow, I'm awful at this game. But the truth of the matter is, the gear I was wearing was not great for parsing in. My champion level was incredibly low. And yeah, my rotation was horrible. My light attack weaving was worse, but there's a lot more to it than just that. So come and parse once every 50 champion levels as you're coming up. Don't start parsing before 160. There's no point in parsing before you have 2 5-piece sets and a monster set on. There's no point. Don't worry about it. Get to 160 first, get your 5-piece sets on, get your monster set on, and then once every 50 levels or so, just come here and beat on the dummy a few times. Try to keep your dots up, try to keep your buffs up, and try to use your spammable anytime all of that's happening. Just kind of practice and then check how much damage you did, and then come back 50 levels later and see how that's improved. Your champion points are going to do a lot for your damage as you're leveling up, improving your gear, getting your trial sets, golding that out. Each one of these things that you do along the way is going to significantly increase your damage. Not only that, but getting your arena weapon, right? It's not like you're gonna step up to the dummy on day 1 and you're gonna have everything you need to do 100k parse. I definitely felt the difference when I switched from my Hundings to my parse set, when I changed that parse set from purple to gold, and when I changed that gold parse set into a perfected gold parse set, when I got my Maelstrom weapon on the back bar, right? All of these things were adding 2, 3, 4k damage at a time, along with all the champion points, and it's a process. So don't feel bad if you go and you parse and you're not hitting the 100k DPS that the build says you can hit with it. Nobody does that. It's a journey of collecting passives, collecting skills, collecting better gear and upgrading that gear, and then mastering your rotation. I usually tell people to try to aim to beat 10,000 DPS per 100 CP. As long as you stay on that track, by the time you hit 900 CP or so, you're going to be hitting around 90k DPS, which is phenomenal. Anything you're doing beyond 80, 90k DPS is extraordinary and more than you need to complete the hardest content in the game. So shoot for 10k per 100 CP. So that would mean at 200 CP, you're hitting for 20k, and 300 CP, you're hitting for 30k, and so on. And if you're beating that goal, all the better. If you're behind on the goal, you know something's wrong. Either your rotation's off or your gear isn't very good, and there's room for improvement. And like I said, when I did my first parse, I was hitting around 12k. And now I'm hitting for around 100K. If I can do it, so can you. Don't be discouraged. Don't expect it to happen overnight, and certainly don't expect it to happen without a little bit of practice. Oh, and I should also point out that it's very important that you parse on this dummy right here. This guy's going to give you synergies like he just did there. You can grab those for resources back. That's going to help with your sustain. He's also giving us a ton of buffs. All of these buffs here are given to us by this dummy, which is going to significantly increase our damage, our sustain, and it's going to feel like we're playing in a group as opposed to playing by ourselves. If you parse on another dummy like this one right here, or any other dummy that's not this one, right? If you parse on something like this, you're not going to get those buffs. You're going to do significantly less damage, and you're going to feel even worse about your parse. Nobody parses on these, and anytime you see a parse number posted on the internet, it was posted based on parsing on this dummy that gives the buffs, because this is the one that replicates real game circumstances the best. It's giving you the buffs that your tanks and your healers would be giving you. It's giving you the sustain that your group would be giving you. It's just much more true to the game to parse on this right here. So make sure you parse on the actual parse dummy, and then also make sure you stand behind him, particularly if you're going to be using nodes like Backstabber, which is going to be the best one for parsing, but it only works if you're flanking the enemy. So make sure you're standing behind the parse dummy. And that's it. If you assess the situation and you choose the right rotation, whether it's an AoE specific rotation or a single target specific rotation, if you're light attack weaving in between your abilities and then using the ultimate that you generate every 1 or 2 minutes when you get it, don't save that thing for too long. If you're using your potions on cooldown, if you're eating your food before you go into battle, getting the right gear, right? Remember, not every set is created equal. Some sets used to be good and they're not anymore. Some sets were always bad. The meta is always changing in Elder Scrolls Online. So make sure if you want to do big damage, you've got gear that's capable of doing big damage. Keep your buffs and your dots up at all times, and get your gear traded and enchanted correctly. Your traits and your enchants are not to be underestimated. These do a lot for your damage. Once you've got it all traded and enchanted, then start golding it out, starting with your weapons, then onto your monster set, and then your gear, and then finally your jewelry last, because it's just so expensive to do so. And don't feel bad if you never gold it out. I have plenty of sets where I never bothered to gold out my jewelry. And then last but not least, practice. Once you've started assembling all of these things, practicing is going to double your damage almost without exception. When people start practicing on the dummy, their damage doubles within a week. That's not an exaggeration, that's a fact. It's just that instant feedback you get from what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong, and how much of a difference all of those things are making, always results in people's damage output almost doubling instantly once they start using a parse dummy. But don't come here and beat your head against the wall for too long. You know, like I said, parse on it a little bit, get an idea of where you are, go get some champion levels, practice your rotation out in the field, then come back, beat on them again, and see how much your damage has gone up. It's very satisfying to track that progress, and it's good feedback to have so that you're not flying blind. And there you have it, guys. That is how we increase our damage in Elder Scrolls Online. All right, and before I end, I'm going to talk about some incredibly useful add-ons for PC users that they can use to make the process of increasing your damage so much easier. The first one I'm going to talk about is Combat Metrics. This is one we use to evaluate our damage live. When we're in a dungeon, when we're parsing, if we're attacking the dummy, right here, it's telling us how much damage we're doing. See right here, it says 20,000, 17,000, 15,000, right? It's telling us what our damage per second is. It is a phenomenal add-on for knowing if what you're doing is right or wrong. You get real-time feedback as you're fighting or parsing. Not only that, but you can open it up by typing /CMX in chat, and it's going to bring up a report of your damage. So at the end of a parse, you can look in here and see, oh man, I did a great job. My parse here was 11,000 DPS, right? Because I did, I think, what, 4 or 5 light attacks. Nothing fantastic. And it shows us how much of our damage came from our light attacks. It shows us how much of our damage came from our Relican, one of the sets we're wearing, right? So in here, you can evaluate what your uptime was on your Relican. I only had 1 stack of each. That's good. If you see 2 stacks of Relican, that means you dropped your Relican and had a 2nd stack of level 1 Reli. You don't ever want to see more than 1 stack of level 1 Reli in a parse. That means you dropped your stacks at some point. This should always be 1. If it's more than 1, you're missing your light attacks and you need to improve them. All right, next we have another fantastic add-on. Speaking of light attacks, is this one right here. It's called Light Attack Helper. It's telling me my light attacks per second on that little parse was 0.32. You want to shoot for a light attack ratio of roughly 0.8 and above is fantastic. 0.9 is really amazing, and all of your highest parses are going to be right around there at 0.9 and above, but anything above 0.8 is going to allow you to do fantastic damage. If I sit here and do nothing but cast light attacks, I can get a little over 1 light attack per second. However, if we're only light attacking between every ability, we can only cast an ability once per second. That's what this add-on is here, global cooldown bar. That tells us when we're allowed to cast our next ability. It's there for new players to help them understand what the cadence of the game is, so you know when you're allowed to cast that next ability, and just as important, when you're allowed to light attack again. So what you're going to do is you're going to light attack and an ability, light attack, ability, right? And so every time that bar is almost empty, you're going to light attack again, and then you're going to use the ability. This is going to let you know how fast you can light attack an ability. If you press the light attack too soon, it's not going to go off and the ability will cancel it. So an add-on like that is going to tell you how fast your rotation should be. If you go too slow, you're losing a ton of damage. If you go too fast, you're going to start missing light attacks. And so there you go. You've got combat metrics telling you how much damage you're doing in real time. You've got light attack helper telling you how many light attacks per second you're getting in real time. And then you've got like global cooldown bar, or another great one is combat metronome, which does the same thing with a slightly different aesthetic, right? And that's going to tell you when you should be queuing up that next ability until your internal clock kind of gets used to casting 1 light attack and 1 ability every 1 second. I won't get into weaving on this video because I have a whole video that I already made just for weaving. I highly recommend you check that out. It's going to be in the description below. If you don't know what weaving is and how to effectively do it, don't be scared. It's actually really easy to do. I'll put that link in the description below. Be sure to click it and check it out if you don't already know how to weave. All right, guys, and that concludes this video. If you ever want to hang out with someone else who loves Elder Scrolls Online, be sure to swing by my Twitch stream at twitch.tv/luckyghost. If you're looking for build guides and more, be sure to check out eso.justlootit.com. Link in the description below for both of those, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. I'd like to thank my YouTube members for supporting the channel by becoming members. To find out how to become a member of this channel and what the perks are, click the join button below.